All right, let's jump into another deep dive. You guys sent us some really fascinating stuff this time, focusing on the U.S. economy and the political landscape. And wow, things seem to be getting pretty wild over there.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a roller coaster ride right now.
The excerpts you shared from that Korean source, Oro, which, by the way, translates to turbulent America, paint a pretty intense picture.
Intense is a good word for it.
We're seeing economic uncertainty, political tension, social anxieties. It's like the whole shebang over there.
And it seems like the ripples are starting to reach other countries, too. There's a real sense of interconnectedness these days, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So the big question is, are these just growing pains for the U.S., or is something more fundamental shifting in the American story?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Let's try to figure it out. One of the most striking things that jumped out from these sources was the contrast between expectations after Trump's election and the reality of his second term.
You're right. There's definitely a disconnect there. Remember that initial stock market surge after his election victory? The NASDAQ jumped like, what was it, 8.7%?
Yeah, investors were pretty optimistic, it seemed, about his economic promises. But now, in his second term, things are telling a very different story.
A very different story indeed. The NASDAQ took a nosedive, plummeting over 11% in just the first 10 days of his second term. And the data you sent shows that both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 have kept sliding.
Dropping between 7 and 12% since January 21st.
Oof. That golden age Trump promised seems to be fading fast.
Of course, Trump and his supporters are pointing fingers at Biden's policies. They say those are the real culprit behind the economic downturn. But if that's the case, how do you explain that initial surge after Trump's election? It seems a bit contradictory.
Yeah, the timeline doesn't really add up for that argument to hold water.
Doesn't it seem more likely that what we're seeing now is the result of Trump's second-term policies, combined with a general feeling of unease in the market? It's not just about placing blame, but about understanding the complexities at play.
I completely agree. It's a complex web of factors.
And the shift in public opinion seems to reflect that complexity. Trump's economic approval rating has taken a hit.
Only 39% approval and a pretty significant 49% disapproval.
Yeah, those numbers definitely say something.
They do. It suggests that people are feeling the effects of these policies in their own lives,
Yeah.
And they're starting to lose confidence in the direction things are headed.
It's not just reflected in the markets either. Businesses are feeling it too. The sources mentioned manufacturers holding back on new orders. It sounds like they're hesitant to make any big commitments right now. What do you think is behind this wait-and-see approach?
Well, businesses thrive on stability and predictability. And right now, the U.S. economy just doesn't have much of either. This hesitancy to invest, to expand, it really reflects a lack of faith in the current economic trajectory. And it's not just small businesses feeling this way either.
Yeah, some big financial institutions are also sounding the alarm.
Goldman Sachs just lowered their U.S. growth forecast from 2.4% to 1.7%.
And Morgan Stanley is even more pessimistic. They're predicting a growth rate of just 1.5%.
Yikes. And then there's J.P. Morgan. They initially estimated the chance of a recession at like 10 to 15%.
Right, but now they've tripled that estimate to 30%.
Those are some pretty big players in the financial world. And their projections suggest that things could get a lot rougher before they get better. What do you think this means for the average person, especially those who might not be following the stock market all that closely?
That's a great question. It's easy to think that if you're not directly investing in stocks, these economic shifts don't really affect you. But the truth is, economic slowdowns touch everyone. It can mean fewer jobs, wages staying the same, and just an overall feeling of uncertainty.
Right, and that uncertainty ripples throughout society.
It's not just about numbers on a screen, It's about people's livelihoods, their ability to plan for the future. And even for those who are invested, it can be pretty unsettling.
Yeah, especially for folks seeing their retirement savings dwindle. That can create a lot of anxiety and fear. It underscores how crucial economic stability is for individual well-being.
And unfortunately, these forecasts aren't painting a very stable picture for the U.S. right now. They suggest that the U.S. might be heading for some rough seas.
And that's a good way to put it.
It's not just instability at home that we're seeing either. Things are heating up on the international stage as well. It seems like Trump's tariff policies have triggered a trade war with Canada.
Yeah, the situation with Canada is a prime example of how economic policies can have consequences that nobody really expects.
It all started with Trump imposing tariffs, and then Canada retaliated. They're not holding back either.
Nope. They slapped a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S.
Ouch. I bet that's going to hit some American wallets pretty hard.
It will, especially for states that depend heavily on Canadian electricity. And it's important to remember that the cost of those tariffs and surcharges, they ultimately get passed down to consumers.
Right, so it might seem like a fight between governments, but it's actually the everyday people on both sides of the border who end up feeling the impact.
Exactly. And Canada's stance is crystal clear. They're not going to sit back and watch while their national interests are compromised.
The source even quoted the Premier of Ontario taking a hard line. Not only did they impose that surcharge, but they're also threatening to completely cut off electricity if the U.S. escalates things further. They're playing hardball.
Absolutely. And this whole conflict with Canada, it reflects a bigger trend we're seeing on the global stage. More and more countries are starting to question those U.S.-centric economic policies. They're willing to take action to protect their own interests.
It's like a power shift is happening. The U.S. might be facing more resistance to its economic dominance than it used to.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
And all this tension is having a huge impact on the markets.
You know, the NASDAQ plunged 4%, and Tesla's stock took a massive hit. It dropped over 15% in just one day.
Yeah, that's a pretty big drop.
Those kinds of drops are a clear sign that there's a lot of uncertainty and fear about a full-blown recession. It's a knee-jerk reaction to the trade war and all those pessimistic economic forecasts.
Speaking of knee-jerk reactions, remember the circuit breaker we talked about in a previous deep dive, the one that happened back in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic?
Right. When trading was halted to prevent a total market collapse.
The sources actually mentioned that there's a chance we could see another circuit breaker under Trump's presidency. Only this time, it wouldn't be because of a global pandemic.
This time, it would be triggered by his own economic policies.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? The policies that are supposed to be strengthening the economy might end up doing the opposite, creating even more instability and fear.
It definitely highlights how unpredictable things can be.
It's a reminder that economic policies, especially those as big and complex as tariffs and trade wars, can have unintended consequences. We live in a globalized world, and that means actions taken in one part of the world can ripple out and affect everyone, often in ways that nobody really predicted.
Exactly. Like a butterfly effect almost.
And speaking of ripple effects, it's not just the economic landscape feeling the tremors. It seems like social and political unrest are bubbling to the surface, too. The sources mention the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian activist and permanent U.S. resident.
That case definitely raises some eyebrows.
It raises some serious questions about civil liberties and due process. Khalil was arrested without any prior charges or convictions related to terrorism.
And the sources said that neither the Department of Homeland Security nor the Attorney General even saw him as a threat.
Yet he was detained solely on the authority of ICE. It's pretty unsettling.
It is.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the balance between national security and individual rights, especially in times of heightened tension. Are we seeing a shift where security trumps individual liberties?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves. Even in a country built on democratic ideals, those freedoms are precious and they can be fragile. It's important to protect them, especially in times of uncertainty when we feel threatened.
I couldn't agree more.
And then there was that really strange incident on a plane where a man was arrested for assault. He claimed he was on his way to meet with Trump.
That's a bizarre one.
It's almost like all the anxieties we've been talking about, the economic uncertainty, the political polarization.
Right.
It's all manifesting in these random acts of aggression.
It's like the pressure cooker is starting to whistle.
And as if things weren't chaotic enough, it seems like Mother Nature is adding fuel to the fire. The sources warn of a severe weather system that's about to slam a huge part of the U.S. Heavy rain, potential flooding, mudslides, even blizzards.
Yikes. That's a lot to deal with all at once.
It feels like America is facing a perfect storm of challenges right now. With all this going on, what's the average person supposed to do? How do you navigate this kind of turbulence?
That's a really good question. And honestly, it's one that we'll dig into more deeply in the next part of our deep dive. But before we move on, there's one more piece of news we need to mention.
Oh, right. The tragic train accident in L.A.
Yes. 2 pedestrians were killed by a Metrolink train in Lake Balboa. It's a sobering reminder that even amidst all these larger events, individual tragedies are still happening. Life goes on, even when the world feels like it's spinning out of control.
It's a lot to process, all of it. But it's important to remember that there are always stories of resilience and hope, even amidst the challenges. We'll be sure to explore those as we continue our deep dive.
Absolutely. There are always glimmers of light, even in the darkest of times. So as we keep going with this deep dive into what's happening in America, These sources you gave us show a really interesting change in how people are viewing Trump's leadership.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that. What's changing?
Well, it seems like what's actually happening with the economy is starting to challenge that rock-solid faith some of his supporters had in him.
That's interesting. The sources did mention a drop in pro-Trump comments, especially online, like on social media and stuff. Do you think that's connected to the economic problems?
It's tough to say for sure, but it's definitely possible. You know, when people start feeling the pinch, those promises of a booming economy under Trump might not sound so convincing anymore.
Yeah, it's like that saying, it's the economy, stupid. People tend to judge their leaders based on how their policies affect them day to day. When the cost of living is going up, the stock market's down, jobs are hard to find. Well, even the most diehard supporters might start to waver.
Exactly. It shows how strong economic realities are. They can cut right through all the political talk. People are living through the consequences of these policies, and that's changing how they see Trump's leadership.
Let's shift gears a little and talk about the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil. This feels like a big deal, even though it's not directly related to the economy.
Yeah, this case brings up some important questions about civil liberties and due process in the U.S. Here's a Palestinian activist, a permanent resident, arrested without any charges or convictions related to terrorism.
The sources even pointed out that neither Homeland Security nor the Attorney General considered him a threat.
Right, but he was still detained, just based on ICE's authority. It's a little unnerving.
It is. It makes you think about the balance between security and individual rights. Are we seeing a shift where security becomes more important than individual freedoms?
It's definitely a question worth asking.
It's like a reminder that even in a country that's supposed to be all about democratic ideals, those freedoms aren't always guaranteed. They can be pretty fragile. And it's crucial to protect them, especially when times are uncertain and we're feeling threatened.
Absolutely. We can't take those freedoms for granted.
And then there was that strange incident on the plane with the guy who was arrested for assault who claimed he was going to meet Trump.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
It's almost as if all this anxiety we've been talking about, the economic uncertainty, the political divide, it's all coming out in these seemingly random acts of aggression.
It's like all that tension has to go somewhere.
Now let's get back to the economy. We talked about those big drops in the NASDAQ and Tesla's stock price. Were those drops just because of Trump's policies, or are there other things going on?
Well, Trump's policies are definitely a factor. They're adding to the uncertainty. But it's never just one thing that causes such big swings in the market.
Right.
Remember when Canada announced that 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S.?
Yeah.
Even though it would only directly affect a small number of American households, something like 1.1 million, according to the sources, the news itself had a huge psychological impact.
Ah, you're talking about the ripple effect again, how even small things can trigger big reactions in the market.
Exactly. Investors were already on edge because of the potential for a trade war and a recession. And then Canada's move just added fuel to the fire. It confirmed their fears, leading to that sell-off frenzy that drove the market down even further.
It's like fear itself can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people worry about the economy, the more likely they are to make choices that make things even worse.
It's a classic example of how psychology plays a huge role in economics. It's not just about the numbers, but how people feel about those numbers and what they do because of them. And this brings us back to the possibility of another circuit breaker happening under Trump's presidency.
The sources made that sound pretty ironic, that the policies he put in place might actually trigger the very thing meant to protect the market from crashing.
It really does show how economic policies, especially ones as big and disruptive as tariffs and trade wars, can have unexpected consequences. The world's markets are so interconnected that what happens in one place can set off a chain reaction that affects everyone.
And we're already seeing that chain reaction starting. The sources said that China has started putting retaliatory tariffs on U.S. agricultural products. Where do you think this is all headed?
This back-and-forth escalation is pretty typical in trade wars. One side puts on tariffs, the other side retaliates, and pretty soon it spirals out of control into an exchange that hurts everyone involved. In this case, China seems to be targeting American farmers specifically, and a lot of them depend heavily on exporting to China.
The sources even quoted John Boyd Jr., the president of the National Black Farmers Association. He accused Trump of using farmers as bargaining chips in this trade war.
It's a valid concern. Farmers often get caught in the middle of these trade disputes. The idea behind tariffs might be to protect domestic industries, but the reality is that they often just lead to higher prices for consumers, limited access to markets for producers, and just a general atmosphere of economic instability.
So you've got a lot of interconnected problems here. The stock market, trade wars, social unrest, and even climate change adding to the mess. It's a pretty bleak picture of what's happening in America.
Mm.
Do the sources offer any hope, any ideas for how to deal with all this?
They don't really give a clear-cut solution, but they do give us something to think about. They highlight a concerning trend among some Americans, a tendency to cling to beliefs that aren't really supported by evidence, and to engage in what they call Indian rain dances.
Indian rain dances. What does that even mean in this context?
It's a way of describing how some people just hope things will magically get better without taking any real action. It's like believing that wishing really hard will make the economy recover, the stock market bounce back, and all the problems just disappear.
So it's like denial, avoiding the reality of the situation.
Exactly. And the sources argue that this kind of thinking isn't just unhelpful, it can actually be harmful. Instead of facing the challenges head-on and doing something about them, people get stuck in a cycle of wishful thinking and inaction. They might even double down on risky investments, like putting more money into a failing stock, hoping for a turnaround that might never happen.
It reminds me of gambling addiction in a way. That disconnect between what's real and what people want to believe, fueled by the hope of a big payoff that's not at all guaranteed.
It's an interesting comparison. Both involve taking risks and hoping for a positive outcome, even when the odds are stacked against you.
So if this Indian rain dance mentality is so bad, what's the alternative? What do the sources suggest people do instead?
They recommend a more practical and realistic approach. Instead of blind faith or wishful thinking, people should take control of their situation. They need to look at information critically, understand the risks, and make decisions based on facts, not emotions.
So it's about empowering people to be active in shaping their own economic well-being, rather than being passive victims of circumstance.
Exactly. It's about realizing that while we can't control everything that happens around us, we can control how we respond to it. Instead of waiting for someone to save us or for a miracle to happen, we need to take practical steps to protect our financial futures.
What would those practical steps look like? Do the sources offer any guidance?
While they don't lay out a step-by-step plan, they do give some valuable insights. They encourage people to spread their investments around, to avoid high-risk things like leveraged trading, and to prioritize saving and spending responsibly over just buying a lot of stuff.
So it's about making smart choices, taking a long-term view, and not chasing quick wins or unrealistic expectations.
Exactly. Economic security is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be good times and bad times, but a well-informed and disciplined approach is more likely to lead to lasting success.
It's about taking control of your financial future instead of leaving it up to chance or what politicians decide to do.
Exactly. And this message applies beyond just the current economic situation. It's a timeless reminder that in a world full of uncertainty, knowledge is power. The more we understand about what's shaping our world, the better prepared we are to handle the challenges that come our way.
So for our listeners who are absorbing all this information, what are the key takeaways they should keep in mind as they try to make sense of this complicated situation?
I think the most important thing to remember is the importance of critical thinking. We are constantly bombarded with information, and it's easy to get caught up in stories that just reinforce our biases or offer easy solutions to complex problems. The sources urge us to question everything, to look deeper, to go beyond the headlines and sound bites.
It's about being a smart consumer of information, recognizing that not everything we read or hear is true or unbiased.
Exactly. It's about developing a healthy skepticism and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions. It's also about recognizing that there are many different perspectives on every issue, and each one has its own validity.
So instead of just blindly accepting or rejecting information, it's about carefully thinking it through and considering all sides.
Exactly. The world is rarely black and white. There are shades of gray, complexities, and unforeseen consequences that often get overlooked in simple explanations.
So as our listeners continue to learn about these issues, they should keep in mind that there aren't any easy answers. It's a process of constantly learning, thinking critically, and reflecting carefully.
Absolutely. Understanding how our world works is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
It's about staying curious, staying informed, and staying involved, even when the news is unsettling and the challenges seem impossible to overcome.
Because in a world that's facing so much change and uncertainty, knowledge is truly power.
Okay, so we've dug deep into the economic and political chaos in the U.S., exploring all the anxieties, the uncertainties, and the potential fallout. But I feel like there's more to uncover. What else do the sources reveal? We'll continue our deep dive after a quick...
Hold on, before we move on, there's one more point I think we need to talk about.
Oh, of course. What is it?
The sources really emphasize something important. Amidst all these big events and abstract discussions, we can't lose sight of the human side of things.
You're right. It's easy to get lost in the numbers and the political arguments, but at the end of the day, these events are affecting real people, real lives.
Exactly. The sources remind us that while we're discussing economic indicators, trade wars, and political instability, there are human stories happening in the middle of it all. Stories of resilience, struggles, and the strength of the human spirit.
They actually shared a really moving example. Remember the story about those medical professionals who died in that helicopter crash while coming back from a mission? That one really got to me.
Yeah, that story really shows how even those who are dedicated to saving lives aren't immune to the uncertainties and dangers in the world. Their commitment and sacrifice highlight how important human connection and compassion are, especially when times are tough.
It's a strong reminder that while we're analyzing economic trends and debating political strategies, there are real people on the front lines, dealing with real challenges and making incredible sacrifices.
And it's not just about recognizing the heroes, but also acknowledging the struggles of everyday people trying to navigate these difficult times. The sources encourage us to be empathetic, to try to see the world from other people's perspectives, and to remember that everyone has a story to tell.
It's about remembering that we're all connected, recognizing our shared humanity, and understanding that what we do affects others beyond our immediate circle.
Absolutely. And this leads to a crucial point the sources emphasize. Focusing on the living, on the tangible parts of our lives, instead of getting lost in abstract ideas and grand narratives.
It's about shifting our focus from what divides us to what unites us, remembering that we're all in this together, facing these challenges as one global community.
Exactly. The sources suggest that instead of clinging to rigid political beliefs or chasing financial success, we should prioritize human connection, compassion, and a sense of shared responsibility for the well-being of our communities and our planet.
It's about finding meaning and purpose in something bigger than ourselves, recognizing that true fulfillment comes from meaningful relationships and contributing to something larger than our own individual pursuits.
Exactly. It's about being grateful for the things we often take for granted, like our health, our loved ones, and the natural world around us. Even in the middle of all the chaos and uncertainty, there's still beauty to be found, joy to be experienced, and connections to be made.
And that brings us to the heart of what this deep dive has been about, exploring how to find meaning and purpose in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
We've looked at the forces shaping our world, but in the end, each person has to decide how to handle these turbulent times. The sources encourage us to be active in our own lives, to seek knowledge, challenge assumptions, and make choices that align with our values.
It's about realizing that we have the power to shape our own destinies, to contribute to our communities, and to work towards a more just and sustainable world.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought for now.
I'm all ears.
The world is always changing. There will always be challenges, uncertainties, and unexpected events. But amidst all the changes, there's also opportunity. The opportunity to learn, to grow, to connect, and to make a difference. The sources remind us that we shouldn't be afraid of the unknown, but embrace it with curiosity and a willingness to adapt and evolve.
What a great way to look at it. Thank you for guiding us through these difficult and complicated topics. And to you, our listener, we hope this exploration has sparked your curiosity and encouraged you to keep seeking knowledge and engaging with the world around you.
Remember, the world is full of amazing things, complexities, and opportunities. Embrace the journey and never stop exploring.
And that's a wrap on this part of our deep dive. We'll be back with the final part, where we'll look at some potential solutions and strategies for navigating these turbulent times. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into all the craziness going on in America. We've talked about a lot, from the economic fears and political tensions to social unrest and even extreme weather. It's been a wild ride looking at the challenges facing the U.S. and how they're affecting the world. As we head into this final part of our exploration, I'm curious, what do we learn from these sources about potential solutions? Are there strategies for navigating all this chaos?
You know, it's interesting. The sources don't exactly give us a step-by-step guide to fixing things. It's not like a survival manual for economic turmoil or political upheaval.
Right.
Instead, they point to a shift in mindset, like a different way of thinking about these challenges that can help people and communities find their own ways forward.
Ooh, I like that. What kind of mindset shift are we talking about? Well, the sources emphasize that we need to get past this blame game, this tendency to look for easy answers and scapegoats.
I see where you're going with this.
Instead of getting lost in the political back and forth or the endless news cycle, they suggest a more proactive approach, one that's focused on finding solutions.
So it's about taking responsibility, recognizing that we all play a part in shaping the future, even when things feel totally overwhelming.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that things are complex and that there's no magic bullet that will fix everything.
I hear you.
But it's also about recognizing the power we have when we work together. When we realize that even small choices and actions can make a difference and create positive change.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not about waiting for someone else to fix things or for some miracle solution to appear, right? It's about each of us doing our part. But what does that actually look like? The sources talked about moving away from Indian rain dances. What are some concrete steps we can take to go beyond just wishful thinking?
One key thing is focusing on the things we can actually control. Instead of getting all worked up about the stock market or the latest political drama, we can focus on building resilience in our own lives and communities.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like, maybe we can find ways to diversify our income, learn some new skills, support businesses in our area, or strengthen our social networks.
So it's about creating a sense of stability and security from the bottom up instead of relying on systems that might be crumbling.
That's the idea. It's about giving ourselves and our communities the tools to weather whatever storms come our way.
The sources also seem to emphasize the importance of knowledge and critical thinking. How does that fit into this whole solutions-oriented approach?
Well, with so much information out there these days, it's
Yeah.
really important to be able to tell what's true and what's not, to question what we hear, and to think critically about where our information comes from.
Right.
It's about becoming smarter consumers of news and media, recognizing bias and agendas, and looking for diverse perspectives.
So we shouldn't just accept everything we hear or read.
Right.
We should be actively questioning, digging deeper, and forming our own opinions based on facts.
Absolutely. And it's not just about taking in information. It's also about seeking out opportunities to learn and grow.
I love that.
Like maybe taking some online courses, going to workshops, or even just having conversations with people who have different views.
It's about always wanting to learn new things, always trying to understand the world and our place in it better.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point the sources bring up, the power of human connection and working together.
Ah, yes. You mentioned this earlier, remembering that there are real people at the heart of all these big challenges. How do we translate that into action?
Well, it starts with realizing that we're not alone in this. We're all part of this big global community, and we're all facing these interconnected challenges together. So instead of giving in to fear and isolation, the sources encourage us to connect with each other, to try to understand each other, and to work together on solutions that benefit everyone.
So it's about harnessing the power of community, understanding that we can accomplish so much more when we work together.
Exactly. And this can take many forms. We can support local initiatives and organizations. We can engage in meaningful conversations with people from different backgrounds and who have different points of view. It's about remembering that we're all human, no matter our differences.
It's about moving past that us versus them mentality that we see so much in politics and embracing a more inclusive and cooperative way of solving problems.
You got it. It's about realizing that our own well-being is tied to the well-being of everyone else. When we help each other and share resources, we create a stronger and fairer society for everyone.
So if we were to sum up all these insights into a few key takeaways for our listeners, what would they be?
Okay, first, even though the challenges facing America and the world seem huge, there's always hope. Each of us has the power to create positive change. Second, we need to shift our thinking. Instead of being afraid and reactive, we need to be proactive and focus on finding solutions. Focus on what you can control, make your own life and community more resilient, and never stop learning. And last but not least, never underestimate the power of human connection and collaboration. Reach out to others, build bridges, and work together to create a better, more sustainable, and fairer future for everyone.
That's a really powerful and inspiring message. It's a great reminder that even in the middle of all the chaos and uncertainty, there's always potential for growth, transformation, and positive change. Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive. Your insights have been so valuable.
My pleasure.
And to you, our listeners, we hope this exploration has given you some new perspectives, piqued your curiosity, and made you feel empowered to face these tough times with hope and a sense of agency.
Remember, the journey of understanding and growth never really ends. Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Stay informed, stay inspired, and we'll catch you next time.